Shemai, and welcome to Our Small Table. Today we're making macaroni and cheese and having a brief update. Here's our finished dish. Let's see how we got here. So the intention is to do a mostly unedited video, mostly real time, but I haven't made one of these videos in quite some time, obviously, so we'll see how that actually goes. I have the oven heated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and a pot of salted water on a rolling boil, to which we're going to go ahead and add the pasta. This one little thing I do here, just because it makes me smile, is I like to use a combination of small shell pasta and small elbow macaroni. You don't have to do that. That's just because the idea of shell bow pasta, that just makes me smile, so I like to do it when I can, half and half. They both cook at the same time because they're the same size. But you can do all of whatever small pasta you prefer. The pot of water is just slightly off camera because it's not interesting to watch water boil. And I've turned the heat down slightly to maintain the boil but keep it from boiling over. The one piece of sort of specialty equipment that will be needed is an oven-safe pan. This one's in my favorite color. And remember, if the handle is not oven-safe, the pan is not oven-safe, so make sure you're making good choices. There may be the slight sound of cat in the background. There's not a lot I can do about that. And we're turning this on to a little bit higher than medium. And we're just going to melt our tablespoon of butter in here. I've made macaroni and cheese on the channel previously, I'm fairly sure. I know that I've done a bechamel sauce on the channel, but about 3 years ago I completely changed my method for making the sauce and wrote this recipe, and it's now the only recipe I use for macaroni and cheese, so I thought I would go ahead and give it a video. I had a comment recently asking why it's been so long since I put up a new video, and I thought I don't normally put a lot of personal information about me on the channel because I assume people mostly just want to see the recipes, but I can't explain why it's been so long without talking about my own life. So we have to go all the way back to 2018. I put up a video as part of my regular schedule and then went to the emergency room and they said I needed emergency surgery. So I was transported through a blizzard to a larger hospital and had surgery, major surgery. And I had one video already recorded at that point, which I went ahead and put up on the channel, and I believe I put in the description that I had had surgery, and so the channel would have a delay in videos. But the recovery on major surgery is not the fastest thing in the world, even if you've done it before. So time dragged on without my being able to do a video. And then a few months after that, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and it's very difficult to convince yourself to sit down and write recipes when you're worried about that sort of thing. Okay, we should start seeing bubbles forming in the butter now that it's melted, and this is about when we're going to add our dry. This is a tablespoon of flour, some salt to preference, and a dash of cayenne pepper. Add that all straight at once. So I was traveling back and forth to see my mom for a few months, and then we moved 1,400 miles, which was closer to her. You want to incorporate these dry ingredients into your melted butter, and you don't want to let them burn. I'm going to keep on moving till they've been fully incorporated here. Make sure that you get the whisk into these little corners of the pan where the sides meet the base. And then this is the biggest change to my recipe. I used to always add the milk all at once for making a bechamel sauce, mainly because that's what all the professionals said to do. And I've come to the conclusion they say that because, as you can see, my sauce with just a little bit added becomes chunky and just unappealing. And they feel that it is harder to smooth out a sauce than it is to thicken a sauce or keep it thick. Whereas I find that it's easier to get my sauce smooth than it is to keep it the right thickness. So I do little bits of milk at a time and keep whisking, keep it incorporated, keep it on the same heat. I will sometimes turn the heat down a little bit as I go. Environmental factors affect so much of cooking that sometimes these little things are different from one day to the next. At any rate, after we moved, I had most of my stuff still at the old place and was living out of basically one load of my belongings. And that wasn't ideal for writing recipes, making videos. And then I lost contact with a friend who was very important to me, and it was very upsetting at the time. I mean, still is upsetting. And that was just, again, doesn't make you feel creative. And then there was a fire that had to be evacuated, and so I went back to the old house. And one of the cats died suddenly, which was of course heartbreaking. And then while I was bringing a load of belongings back to the new place, my car threw a head gasket and was totaled. So I couldn't get out to do like proper grocery trips. We're just getting whatever could be gotten easily. So you can see my sauce is perfectly smooth. And because I'm not pouring in all the milk at once, I can decide if I want it to be thinner or thicker by how much milk I add. So after I finally got settled, and I think that's about all, I'm going to leave probably half a tablespoon unincorporated. After I got settled, my mom passed away, and cooking was something that I got from my mom, and I was still cooking to eat, but this was just not something I wanted to think about or focus on for a little while. And there was, setting up the memorial service and lots of things of that sort that needed to be dealt with. Okay, I'm going to turn this heat down a little bit because I'm going to need to be away from the burner while I drain our pasta, which I have to do off camera. Getting a little bit of a skin on this. That's not a big deal because we've been gentle with this sauce. We can stir it back in. It will reincorporate. It's not a problem. Let that pasta sit in the colander while I incorporate the cheese into this sauce. I use mostly sharp shredded cheddar, which is actually the under section here, but I also like to add a little bit of 4-cheese Mexican blend, simply because it's tasty and it's always nice to have extra. And you can hear the cat, I'm sure. And I do a little bit at a time and stir it in until it's melted, because the cold of the cheese will reduce the temperature of the sauce. And so if you pour it all in at once, it'll be much harder to incorporate. You want to get it melted through. So I had gone back to the old place to collect the rest of my things, and that was where I was when COVID started, which means I was living out of a suitcase, and then I was stranded and stayed there for a time. Before eventually getting back out. And then there was another move, because basically, if you'd like to know the story of why something doesn't happen for me, it probably means there's been at least one move. There's been a lot of moves over the years. But settled now. I have to hold the pan in this awkward way so that I don't disturb the camera, because one of the only real problems with this kitchen is that the burners are not flat. And so the pan just wants to slide off as I stir it. So we've got this nice golden cheesy sauce here. And we're going to add our pasta. And don't hold the colander directly over the pan, because the colander will be dripping. There will be some water that is clinging to it or hasn't completely drained out. And it's not going to kill your sauce to get water in it, but it definitely doesn't help the sauce. It's much easier to stir that pasta in if you do it in small bits. It's the whole story of this recipe, is to do things in small bits. The reason for the cat sounds is that after we lost the one, it was hard to face getting another one, and I didn't want the surviving cat to be lonely, but I also didn't know if it was best to get a new cat, so we hadn't until just 3 weeks ago. So there's a kitten in this house who is just learning her way. Okay. Now we're going to take our smaller spatula and just run it around the outside to get that sauce properly incorporated in. You don't have to put a bunch of time into it, just you don't want to lose a bunch of sauce. And at this point you can completely turn the heat of this burner off. And then flatten it all down. We're going to put a panko and cheese topping on this. The amount for the topping is going to depend on the size of your pan. For me, it's a little less than 1/3 of a cup of panko with a little bit of dehydrated Parmesan cheese, just because I enjoy that flavor, and about 1/4 cup of 4-cheese shredded Mexican cheese blend. And then just kind of spread it to the edges. Careful, you know that the pan is hot because you've been cooking in it, but just be careful. And then, because quite often the cheese will go to the edges and the panko does not, I will pick up little bits of the cheese and bring it to the center where it can melt in the oven. And this is going to get nice and crispy. This is going in the oven now for about 20 minutes, and I will be back when we take it out. And there we have it. It's just out of the oven, and I'm going to run the spatula around the edge so you can see that some of the cheese is clinging to the sides, and we don't want to lose that when we dish it up. This serves 2 as an entree. If you wanted this to be a side dish, you can easily serve 4. Apologies for them. They want my attention. Do remember, if you're using an enameled cast iron pan like I am, that if you have one of these silicone handle holders, covers, that is not enough to protect your hand from being burned as it comes out of the oven. And you also need to have an additional protection here. And this is a silicone mat so that it doesn't damage the countertop. Thanks for joining me at Our Small Table. The recipe we've used today is linked in the video description and is available at oursmalltable.com. Here's hoping it won't be quite so long before the next video.